Hi, everybody, and thanks for stopping in for another episode of Jesus Is. My name is Pat Gunning. I'm the youth minister at Sacred Heart Church in Ocean Beach in San Diego, California. And this Sunday's gospel, we have a pretty famous gospel story. It's the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. And if you're not super familiar with it, in a nutshell, what happens is Jesus goes to a deserted place after he hears about the death of John the Baptist. And the crowds hear of this, and then they all follow Jesus to see him. And Jesus had pity on these people because this was a great loss for the community as well, but also the fact that they traveled all this way to come see him. And so when the evening approached, the disciples asked Jesus if he would dismiss the crowd so that they would go back and eat. And Jesus said there's no need to dismiss them and asked them to give food themselves. To which they said that all they had was 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. So how are they supposed to feed roughly 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish? Everybody gets a little bite. That won't even work. So Jesus asks them to bring them to him, the food, and he holds them, and he thanks the Father in heaven, and he says a blessing, and he gives it to his disciples. Sound familiar? And then he gives them to the disciples give them to the crowds, to the 5,000 people. And they all ate, and there was even enough that there were 12 wicker baskets full left over. So on the surface, this story seems kind of simple. And in a way, this is a lot like our Catholic faith, which our faith can be simple enough that children even can understand it. And yet it's also so deep that not even the best theologians have been able to understand everything there is to know about it. And this is good. It shows that our faith is meant for everyone, and that no matter where you are in life, that there's a place for you in the Catholic Church. There's a place for everyone in the Catholic Church. And this is exactly what Jesus demonstrates to everybody in this gospel as well. He looks at the crowds who came to see him with compassion, and they were tired and hungry and had traveled a long way just to come see him. And it didn't matter to Jesus why the crowds were there. He simply just loved them where they were, without regard to where they came from or even what sins they might have committed, or what sins they had in their souls at that time. Even their lack of understanding of who even Jesus was and why he was there, it didn't matter to Jesus. He totally met them where they were at and knew that this understanding would come later. He simply loved them for where they were and who they were. So Jesus looks at compassion of this crowd because no one thought to bring any food with them. I mean, they traveled all this way, climbed a mountain to come see him, and then they must have been really hungry by the time they finally reached him. So they just wanted to see Jesus, and that must have been really flattering for Jesus. He's like, wow, you guys climbed a mountain to come see me. You didn't even think about food. You just came after me. So Jesus decides to feed the crowd himself. And in another place in the New Testament, in the Gospel of Luke, it mentions that a little boy in the group had 5 barley loaves of bread and 2 fish. And he brought this bread and fish and gave it to Jesus. And Jesus took that small gift of 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and he multiplied it by 5,000. Sometimes Jesus does this with us too. We bring these small gifts that we have to Jesus, our small talents and abilities, and he makes our gifts grow. And when Jesus does this, the increase in our gifts are also not just meant for our own benefit, but our gifts were given to us to be shared with others too. And I also love in this story how Jesus thanks the Father before he multiplied the loaves and fishes, showing that all the good gifts that we have come from God, that nothing we have is ours. This story is beautiful because Jesus feeds thousands on earth. And then this continues as he continues to feed millions of people every day in the Eucharist. We also see once again the language used at Mass here when he blesses the bread, when he says, he said the blessing, broke the loaves, and gave it to the disciples. And I also love how it says he gave them to the disciples, who then gave them to the crowds. This symbolizes how the disciples were the first priests who would give the bread of life, Jesus, to the people. These crowds traveled a long way to see Jesus, and we too are on a journey to the kingdom of heaven, and the Eucharist is what binds us together as his people, as the people of God. Let us try to be good to each other while we journey through life together and share what we have with one another, just like the little boy did in the Gospel of Luke, who shared his bread and fish, his gifts that he had with everyone. His small gift of fish and bread ended up making a huge difference to 5,000 people that day. And his memory lives on throughout the ages because of how Jesus used this small gift that he had to offer. This week, let's ask ourselves if we have any small gift, talent, or ability that we've never used to serve others or haven't used enough. How could our gifts, talents, and abilities be put to good use for our parish family, for our families at home, for our teams, whatever it might be, for the larger community that we live in? I hope you all have a really awesome week. God bless.